Hello, and welcome to my book report analysis on A Thousand Splendid Suns by Haled Hosseini. This was an absolutely incredible book, and I am so glad that I read it. My grandma is the one who recommended it to me, actually, when I was doing my Vietnam interview podcast with her. She talked on and on about this book for about 5 minutes, which is a pretty long time considering that the interview itself was only about 10. And I knew after talking to her that I absolutely wanted to read this book. So I found it on the school website for books and I just started reading it. And eventually I found myself not being able to put it down because I was so sucked into the depthful and intense story. This book took place in Afghanistan in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. It follows the story of two young girls. One is named Mariam and the other is Layla. First, it starts by telling Mariam's story because she runs away from her mom's house to go live with her dad, but her dad is kind of ashamed of her presence because he had an affair, and that's why that she is a child of him. And so he sells her off to an older man, probably in his 30s, like early 30s, and she is 14, and they get married. This is a forced marriage, so that alone was kind of like unsettling to me, but it gets so much more unsettling as I get into the book. But that's the first part of Mariam's story, and then it goes into Lila's story, and Lila is a young girl, but she grew up at the time that Mariam was married to Rashid, is the man that she got married off to. Now Lila was a young girl, so she's probably about 14, 15 years younger than Mariam because she was born the same time that Mariam was like married to Rashid. And we follow her as she's growing up, and she's like 8, 9, 10, early teen years, and she has a friend named Tariq who she absolutely adores. They hang out with each other all the time. They're the same age, and luckily Lila's dad is super loves the idea of like woman education. So he made sure that Lila got the best education that she possibly could. And at the time that she was growing up, there was like communist and like Soviet Union control in Afghanistan, and they were like fighting against the Afghanistan government. And the communist control was actually very good for women's rights because it was giving them a lot more opportunity, even though it brought a lot of war into the streets. But Lila's dad was very supportive of it because of all the opportunities that it gave Lila. Now, as we get further into, it does not have control anymore, and I think the Pakistan government takes back the control, and women, instead of giving more rights, have been taking any right to live without the presence of a man. So if a woman was seen in the street at all, they could be taken from the street and abused or even killed, and no one could say anything about it because they didn't have a man with them, which is so incredibly sad. And also, if they weren't covered up completely, besides like their eyes, then they could be beaten severely, and no one would be able to object, which is so sad. Reading about this made me so incredibly sad. Like, I know I've heard things about it, bits and pieces in the past, but reading this book just really opened my perspective to things that like really did take place in our world. Even though this is a historical fiction novel, so it's not based on a true story, it is drawing from true events. So like things similar to what happened in this book happened in other stories. Okay, so back to Lila. Lila, as she grows up and she gets older, about the time that there was no right for a woman to be alive, and there was just a bunch of fighting in the streets, a bunch of people were moving away. So her friend Tariq, he moved away, and she was in love with him at this time, and so she was so sad that he was moving away. But then her family was thinking of moving away, but right before they could, their house got bombed, and both of her parents died. She was left alive, though, but severely injured, and then she was taken into the home of Rashid. Rashid saw her as a young girl, 14 years of age. He was probably about 40, maybe 50 at this time, and he decided that he wanted to marry her. And so he told her that marrying him was the only way that she could live. And so basically she married him, and he adored her. He was all for her and everything up until the point that she got pregnant and she had a female child because he wanted a male child. And after that, he completely neglected their daughter, and he neglected her as well. And it just became this super, super toxic and bad relationship. And I don't never think I mentioned this, but Rashid and Miriam tried to have a baby, but Miriam never could. And after that, Rashid neglected her and never gave her any attention anymore, and basically just abused her because he felt like he had that power as a man. This story is so insanely sad, and also like very just eye-opening, because women just really didn't have the right to live in this time, and or to learn or anything without the presence of a man. And I think it's really eye-opening to see like the progressions that we've made in the world, and how things have changed, and how things really should still be changing in like third world countries that don't have the kind of support that we do in America, which I'm very grateful for. And to wrap up this video, I found a quote that I feel like really sums up some of the morals and ideas of this story. The quote is, "A society has no chance for success if its women are uneducated." It's true. Like, their society was crumbling and falling apart because they weren't allowing half of their people to be educated and be a part of the society. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, have a good day.